The business plot, the untold conspiracy to overthrow democracy. In the turbulent 1930s, amidst the echoes of the Great Depression and global unrest, a shocking and nearly forgotten chapter in American history unfolded. A conspiracy that almost changed the face of the nation. Known as the business plot or the Wall Street Putsch, this was not some political fiction or a wild imagination running astray. This was an alleged plan by some of the most powerful and wealthy figures in America to overthrow President Franklin D. Roosevelt and establish a fascist dictatorship. Imagine for a moment the wealthiest titans of Wall Street, alarmed by Roosevelt's New Deal policies, conspiring to dismantle democracy itself. It sounds like the plot of a dramatic thriller, but this was a real chapter of our past, and this story demands to be told. Let us set the stage. In the 1930s, the United States was in chaos. The Great Depression had gripped the nation, leaving millions unemployed, hungry, and hopeless. Bread lines snaked through the cities, and despair took hold across America. Franklin D. Roosevelt, or FDR as he is famously known, swept into office in 1933 on the promise of hope. His New Deal aimed to provide relief for the destitute, recover the economy, and reform the financial system. But not everyone shared FDR's vision. Among those who despised the New Deal were wealthy, powerful business leaders who saw Roosevelt's policies as nothing less than an attack on their fortunes and the capitalist system. To them, FDR was a dangerous radical veering toward socialism, and something had to be done, something drastic. And so, the seeds of the business plot were allegedly sown. Meetings were held behind closed doors, and powerful players began whispering plans for a grand coup to seize control of the government. The aim? To replace Roosevelt with a puppet leader, someone who would protect their riches, restore unfettered capitalism, and crush the labor movements ignited by the New Deal. The conspirators had a twisted vision, one inspired by the emerging fascist regimes of Europe. Benito Mussolini's Italy and Adolf Hitler's Germany had shown how centralized power could stabilize a nation, or so they believed. These American elites were dazzled by the efficiency of fascism and wanted an authoritarian figurehead who could rule with an iron hand, stamping out FDR's reforms once and for all. Here's where things get even darker. To execute their plot, the conspirators needed a figure who commanded universal respect, someone the people cherished, someone with undeniable authority and patriotism. That man was Major General Smedley Butler, one of the most decorated Marines in U.S. history. Butler was a hero, a straight-talking military titan with 2 Medals of Honor to his name. He was loved by the public and, crucially, by the millions of military veterans struggling amidst the economic crisis. The plotters believed Butler could rally these veterans, assemble an army of 500,000 soldiers, and march on Washington to depose Roosevelt. The plan was audacious, terrifying, and chillingly calculated. But what the business plotters didn't count on was Smedley Butler's integrity. Butler might have been a general who had fought for his country abroad, but he was also a man committed to democracy. He despised the corruption and exploitation that he had seen up close in the service of corporate interests during his military career. When the plotters approached General Butler, they outlined their vision of a new America, a fascist dictatorship with a Secretary of General Affairs at its helm, effectively a president in all but name. Roosevelt would either be reduced to a figurehead or forced to step down. But instead of agreeing to their plans, Butler listened carefully, gathered evidence, and resolved to expose the conspiracy. This was an act of both incredible courage and deep patriotism. Butler knew the danger of going against powerful men with vast resources, but his conscience left him no choice. In 1934, Major General Smedley Butler stood before the McCormick-Dickstein Committee, a precursor to the House Un-American Activities Committee, and spilled every detail. He described meetings with men like Gerald McGuire, a broker allegedly serving as a liaison for the conspiracy, and revealed the masterminds who sought to recruit him to their dark cause. The committee, tasked with investigating the plot, was confronted with a shocking tale. According to Butler, these men had assured him that money was no obstacle. They were backed by some of the wealthiest names in America. Butler's testimony sent shockwaves through the nation. Yet, surprisingly, the conclusion of the McCormick-Dickstein Committee was ambiguous at best. The committee confirmed that Butler's testimony aligned with some evidence of the conspiracy, but they stopped short of pursuing criminal charges. The plotters faced no prosecution, and many of their names were left uninvestigated. Why? Perhaps it was lack of concrete evidence, or perhaps the enormous power and influence of those implicated rendered the government hesitant to act. To this day, the full truth remains shrouded in mystery. Some branded the plot a hoax, a baseless scheme that never truly posed a threat. But is that interpretation too convenient? Historians continue to debate whether the business plot was a genuine risk to democracy or a half-baked plan with minimal real danger of execution. Regardless of how close the conspirators came to succeeding, the business plot remains a chilling reminder that no democracy is immune to attack. It reveals the fractures that emerge when economic despair and political polarization take hold. In the 1930s, the dire circumstances of the Great Depression gave rise to fear and division, creating fertile ground for radical schemes. It also raises an important question. How far are the wealthy and powerful willing to go to protect their interests? Should we dismiss the business plot as the ramblings of a few elites, or should we see it as a warning about the vulnerabilities of a democratic society when faced with concentrated power? But amidst the shadows of this plot, there shines the bright light of Smedley Butler's bravery and values. Despite pressure and the potential risks to his reputation and well-being, Butler chose to rise above the conspiracy. He rejected the allure of power, refused to exploit the trust of his fellow veterans, and stood steadfast in his commitment to the Constitution. Butler's actions reassure us that even in dark times, there are individuals who stand firm against greed, corruption, and authoritarianism. For this, he earned his place among America's greatest patriots. Now, as we reflect on the business plot, ask yourself, what does this episode teach us about our present and future? We live in a world where economic inequality is ever widening, where political divides deepen daily, and where authoritarian ideas continue to rise in popularity in some corners. History has shown us time and again that challenges to democracy often emerge when societies are under strain. Are we vigilant today to ensure that such conspiracies never threaten our liberties again? The story of the business plot reminds us of two fundamental truths. Democracy is fragile, and its survival depends on the courage of individuals willing to defend it. Let us ask ourselves if, as a society, we are prepared to stand tall, just as Smedley Butler did, undaunted and uncompromising in the face of schemes that threaten our democratic foundations. The business plot, while often relegated to the footnotes of history, demands our attention. It is a story of greed and power, but it is also a story of resistance and loyalty to the ideals of democracy. It reveals both the fragility of our political systems and the strength of individuals willing to fight for what is right. As citizens of a vibrant democracy, it is our responsibility to honor stories like this, not just as historical curiosities, but as lessons for our own times. The business plot may have been thwarted, but let it serve as a timeless warning. Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. This conspiracy, tethered to the shadows of history, reminds us that democracy is not guaranteed. As we cherish it today, we protect not just our government, but the principles that unite us as a free people. Remember Smedley Butler, the man who said no to the seduction of power and yes to the enduring dream of democracy. And in his story, may we find wisdom, strength, and a cause for hope.